Now, before I call the Minister, I have a short statement to make. Before we come to the statement on the Government's 10-year prison capacity strategy, I note that it was published yesterday, the day after Justice questions in the House. This timing was unfortunate, as a publication a day or two earlier would have given honourable members an opportunity to put topical questions to ministers on the new strategy. So I'm very pleased that the Minister has come to the House today to make a statement, and I call the Minister Alex Davies-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I hear your comments. With your permission, I will make a statement on the 10-year prison capacity strategy and annual prison capacity statement the Government published yesterday. As the House will be aware, publishing these documents makes good on a pledge made by the Lord Chancellor to this House in July, when she came to set out the emergency measures we were forced to take in order to prevent our prisons from filling up entirely. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me begin by setting out some context on prison places. As honourable and right honourable members will be aware, on the 4th of December, the National Audit Office published a scathing report on increasing the capacity of the prison estate to meet demand. It is unequivocal in its criticism of the previous government's approach to the criminal justice system, including its commitment to deliver 20,000 additional prison places by the mid-2020s, failing to deliver, with only 500 additional cells being added to the overall prison place stock. While they continue to promise prison places, there were significant delays to projects, in some cases running years behind schedule, and a failure to address rising demand has left the system thousands of places short of the capacity that it requires. The expected cost of MOJ and HMPPS's prison expansion portfolio to build the 20,000 additional places is currently estimated to be £9.4 billion to £10.1 billion, which is at least £4.2 billion higher than the estimate for the 2021 spending review, which was carried out by the previous government. None of this was revealed by ministers at the time, and only came to light when the government was elected in July of this year. It is now clear that even the original mid-2020s commitment was not sufficient to keep pace within the expected demand on prison places, according to the last government's own projections. This put the viability of the entire system in jeopardy. Had we run out of prison places, police would not have been able to make arrests and courts could not have held trials. It could have led to a total breakdown of law and order in our country, with all of the associated risks to public safety. That is why we were forced to take emergency action, releasing some prisoners earlier than they otherwise would have been, in most cases by only a few weeks or months. That brought us precious breathing space. However, if we do not act, our prisons will fill up again, and we must therefore act, including by building more prison places, as a matter of urgency. Integral to our plan for change is ensuring that we have the prison places we need to lock up dangerous criminals and keep the public safe. And the 10-year prison capacity strategy sets out how we will deliver this. Madam Deputy Speaker, the strategy is detailed. It sets out our commitment to build the 14,000 places the last government failed to deliver as part of their 20,000 prison place programme, with the aim of getting it completed by 2031. It further sets out what, where, when and how we will build new prisons and expand existing prisons through additional house blocks, refurbishments and temporary accommodation. Madam Deputy Speaker, the strategy is also realistic. As the House will know, prison building is an extraordinarily complex and expensive undertaking. In particular, the planning process to get sites approved for development is complicated and time-consuming. That is why our delivery plans include contingency prison places, which will provide resilience to our building programme should a project become undeliverable, or provide poor value for money which cannot be taken forward. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are also ambitious. This strategy sets out how we will work with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to streamline the delivery of prison supply, including important reforms to the planning system and delivering on our commitment to recognise prisons as nationally important infrastructure. It is also this government's ambition to secure new land so that we are always ready should further prison builds be required in the future. And we are committed to improving transparency, now and in the future. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will legislate. When parliamentary time allows, we will make it a statutory requirement for the government to publish an annual statement on prison capacity, like the ones we have published. The annual statement will set out prison population projections, the department's plan for supply, and the current probation capacity position. This statement fulfils that transparency commitment for 2024, but crucially, it holds us and future governments to account on long-term planning, so that decisions on prison demand and supply are in balance and that the public are no longer kept in the dark, as they have been, about the state of our nation's prisons. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are being honest with this House and the public about what must happen next. Building enough prison places is only one part of a much wider solution. As the government has already made clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, we simply cannot build our way out of these problems. In the coming years, the prison population will continue to increase more quickly than we can build new prisons. This is why, in October, we launched the Independent Sentencing Review, chaired by former Lord Chancellor David Gauke, alongside a panel of experts, including the former Lord Chief Justice Lord Burnett. It will take a bipartisan look at an issue that has, for far too long, been a political football punted about by both sides. The review's aim is to ensure that we are never, ever again left in a position where we have more prisoners than places available. It will help us to make sure that there is always a prison place for dangerous offenders, that prisons help offenders to turn their lives around, bring down reoffending rates so that there are fewer victims, and that we expand the range of punishments for use outside of prison. The review will make its recommendations in spring next year, and the government looks forward to responding as quickly as possible so that we can begin to implement any necessary policy changes urgently. Madam Deputy Speaker, when this government took office just 5 months ago, we inherited a prison system on the brink of collapse. Instead of dithering and delaying, we have taken the difficult decisions necessary to stop the criminal justice system from grinding to a halt altogether, which could have led to total collapse of law and order in our country. But this is not an overnight fix, and the journey ahead of us is long. This 10-year prison capacity strategy and annual statement, along with the independent sentencing review, are critical steps on that journey. The last government left our prisons in crisis. They put the public at risk of harm. We will fix them for good. We will keep the public safe, restore their confidence in the criminal justice system. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister, Dr. Kieran Mullan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for advance sight of her remarks, and can I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling out what was quite an obvious attempt to avoid scrutiny this week, and thank also the Chair of the Justice Select Committee, who himself had to put in efforts to make sure we had a proper statement today. And I want to begin by being absolutely clear about one thing, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Labour Party think that spending the next few years talking about our record in government is going to stop this opposition from holding them to account. They are dead wrong. There will be no free passes for them on these benches, and it's already clear to the British public why they desperately want them, because they are floundering and they know it. And let me tell the Minister, I will happily spend all day comparing records of governments and inheritances. If Labour MPs and the Minister decry that they've had to release 5,500 prisoners early because of our record, well, let me tell them, the last Labour government didn't just release 5,500 prisoners early, Madam Deputy Speaker, it didn't even release 10,000 prisoners early. Madam Deputy Speaker, by the end of their time in office, Labour had released 80,000 prisoners early. 80,000. That was the state of the system when they were in charge. And that doesn't even include the systematic erosion of the punishment element of our justice system brought about by their introduction of blanket halfway release for essentially the entire prison population. They didn't call it early release, but that is what the British public know it is. That was the record of the Labour government that we had to try and turn around, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm proud of the fact that we began to unpick that by reducing early release from halfway to two-thirds for the most serious offenders. I'm proud of the fact that we introduced a whole life tariff for premeditated child murder and increased maximum sentences for child abusers and others. And let's be absolutely clear about the root cause of the problem we are facing now. The fundamental issue is one of a spike in the remand population. We have approximately 7,000 more people in prison on remand than we normally would. The unprecedented spike has occurred directly as a result of COVID. Directly. They know that. They know that. No, you can't give away in this statement. In fact, prior to COVID, we had got the Crown Court backlog down lower than it had been under the last Labour government. Another record we can be proud of. To try and tackle that, we increased sitting days and introduced Nightingale courts, and contrary to what the government has said, we were clear that we would carry on doing everything possible to bring that number down. We did not and would not have refused extra sitting days to the judiciary, as this government has done. We had agreed a floor on sitting days, not a cap, and negotiations were ongoing. If the judiciary had come to us and asked for more sitting days, we would have responded to that, not told them no, which is what this Labour government has done. And in the prison population estimates that sit alongside this plan is the proof that they truly have already given up on fixing this problem. Because not only do their projections not target bringing the remand population down, Madam Deputy Speaker, they project it going up. That means more victims waiting for trials and more prisoners being released early. We should be building more prison spaces, and actually under our leadership we increased prison capacity at the fastest rate in living memory, but not so we can accommodate more people on remand, but so that we can go even further in ensuring offenders are properly punished and victims get justice. They want to talk about 14 years, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm afraid this plan leaves me asking, what have they been doing for 14 years? They came into office telling the British public they had it all worked out. What have they done on sentencing? Ask somebody else to do a review. What have they done on how we prosecute murder? Ask someone else to do a review. What ideas have they come in with tackling the court backlog? Absolutely none. And today, as the Minister knows, we've simply had a re-announcement of our planned prison building programme. 4 new prisons, all of which were already announced or underway before Labour took office. This is not a bold new strategy, it's a continuation of work started under the Conservative government. So, of course, there are some important questions for the Minister. Firstly, given that we had not done so, why have they now refused additional Crown Court sitting days to the judiciary? Secondly, why do their prison population figures project an increase in the remand population? Thirdly, given they are committed to building more prison spaces, whatever the sentencing review says, because they will decide that, they cannot park responsibility to an independent review, does she commit to continuing our programme of increasing the amount of time the most serious offenders stay in prison? And fourth, missing from the prison population figures is any transparency at all about the number of foreign offenders. What are their estimates for the foreign offender population in our prisons in future years? Madam Deputy Speaker, they blame us for their early release when it was nothing compared to the scale of early release they themselves oversaw when they were last in office. They released prisoners they shouldn't have done. They botched the legislation and have to come back to this House to correct it. They let people without tags that should be tagged, and they give up on fixing the fundamental issue of the remand population. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader Opposition has said that we didn't get everything right in government. She knows there are no easy answers to these challenges, only trade-offs. But this government is making it clearer and clearer how not to do it. And we on these benches are going to be there every step of the way to know the British public know exactly that.
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, yet again, zero humility from the people who put us in this crisis. Absolutely staggering to think that that is what you want to tell the British people. No apology for the crisis you left us. When we took office in July, we were just days away from a complete collapse of our criminal justice system because of the inheritance that we received from that previous government. The fact of the matter is, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is taking action. We have increased Crown Court sitting days, 500 more Crown Court sitting days, to ensure that we have the capacity within the system. Magistrate sentencing powers increased from 6 to 12 months, freeing up 2,000 more in the Crown Court. And he mentions foreign national offenders. I'm glad that he mentions foreign national offenders because, like him, I believe that we need to be doing more to deport foreign national offenders in our jails. But there's a difference between him and me, because this government is actually doing something about it. Less rhetoric, more action, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government is on track to deport more foreign nationals from our prisons than at any time in our recent history. Since coming into office, this government has deported more than 1,500 foreign national offenders than this time last year, when, who was it who was the Immigration Minister? Oh, that's right, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was none other than the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice himself. So, if it was that easy, why didn't you do it after 14 years in government? This government is taking action to ensure that we do have a criminal justice system fit for purpose.
Select Committee Chair Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the prison capacity strategy? Given the crumbling condition of much of the prison estate, it's right that the government is pressing ahead with the delivery of modern prisons. Can I also welcome the explicit link of this strategy to the independent sentencing review and the recognition that without changes to sentencing policy, prisons could be full again in a year's time? extending early release. But does the Minister agree that long-term reduction in prisoner numbers that best protects the public requires a strategy for rehabilitation and to reduce reoffending? When will the government share its proposals for achieving that?
Minister.
I thank the questions from my friend, the Chair of the Justice Select Committee. I'm aware the Lord Chancellor is due to give evidence ahead of the committee next week, and I'm sure she will outline more of these steps in detail. But as we have published today in our capacity going forward on prison, building these more prisons, this is just one step in our plan. We need every single element of our justice system to be working, and that includes this independent sentencing review. We look forward to the recommendations coming forward next year so we can take that forward so that we never have to be in this position again. And we look forward to setting out our plans in due course.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Josh Babarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thanks for advance sight of the statement, and thank you to the Chair of the Justice Select Committee for putting in that point of order that I think helped to bring this to this House today. Years of neglect under the previous Conservative government has left our prisons overcrowded and unequipped to provide the tough rehabilitation required. And this has let down victims and survivors in my patch of Eastbourne and across the country. And in fact, as recently as this week, in opposition, the Conservatives let down those victims and survivors by voting against the measure to exclude people like stalkers and including murderers from the early release scheme. Now, the result of their incompetence is the SDS 40 scheme, which has seen thousands of ex-offenders released early to unlock emergency prison places. Now, the Minister knows my concerns about that scheme, in particular in relation to domestic abuse, and I hope that she'll support my proposals to patch that up. But will the Minister confirm what the criteria will be for reviewing the SDS 40 scheme next year? Now, ultimately, Liberal Democrats believe we need a sustainable solution to tackling this problem. Ultimately, more prisons means more offenders means more victims means more failure. And with 80% of people in prison being reoffenders, we know that reducing reoffending must be the key. I know that, having spent my career supporting kids out of crime and gangs before reaching this place. So why then, in a prison capacity statement of over 1,000 words, is reducing reoffending mentioned just once? Will she reaffirm her commitment to that effort, and can she provide more details on how she will reduce reoffending to protect victims and survivors across this country?
Minister.
Thank the Liberal Democrat spoken for his comments, and he's right to raise the issue of reoffending. I think it's important that we note that we have got prison capacity available to protect the public, to lock up those high-risk offenders, to ensure that we have that public safety measures available. But obviously tackling reoffending is something that we take as a serious priority. That is something that is being looked at across government, and we are pulling every lever available for us. It has to be every government department coming together to tackle this. It's part of what we're doing is with our review, sentencing review as well, the independent sentencing review, looking at how we can really tackle that. But when you have got a prison population that is running up boiling hot, as he knows full well, you cannot do that important work, getting into our prisons, doing that rehabilitation work. I was really, really pleased to visit yesterday HMP Downview, seeing that vital work being done directly with the women who are in that prison. And it's really important if they are to achieve rehabilitation on the outside to prevent reoffending and protect the public. Now, on SDS 40, he will know, and he does know, that we had to take immediate action within days of coming into office in order to protect the public and in order to ensure that we had places in our prison to be able to lock up those high-risk offenders and keep the public safe. Legally, we could only exclude offences and not offenders, and we did introduce a wider set of exclusions than under the last government's early release scheme, and all are released on licence and all are subject to recall. We are working to ensure that we never get in this position again to have emergency releases, so we have got those prison places available and we can work on rehabilitating our prisoners so that they can serve a vital service in society.
Select Committee Member Alex Barros-Curtis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I was just going to refer to my register of interests. I'm a qualified solicitor and a member of the Justice Select Committee under the excellent chairmanship of my honourable friend for Hammersmith and Chiswick. Can I thank the Minister for that statement and the commitments that she's made. I must admit my head is still spinning from the extraordinary response from the Tories opposite for their absolute failure over the last 14 years to build the prison places that they legislated for. So we'll have no more of that hypocrisy. Can I say, I welcome the publication of a 10-year prison capacity statement. I know the Select Committee will scrutinise it carefully. Concerningly, though, it notes that we could run out of prisons by as early as November 2025. So aside from the findings of the independent sentencing review when it comes, what other steps does the Minister anticipate will be taken by the Department in order to bridge the potential gap in prison places?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. He will know that we are stressing every sinew to ensure that we get this right. This is a whole system approach, because justice is a system and we need every single part of it working in order for it to be working correctly. My colleague, the Prisons Minister in the other place, is due to visit Texas to learn from their model there. It's an interesting model where offenders earn time off for custodial sentence for good behaviour, and Texas has actually cut crime by a third. We're also looking at new advances in technology to see how that could help. AI, for example, combined with surveillance cameras in Singapore, monitors offenders and spots moments that could escalate into violence, and that's being done in the Netherlands as well. There are a lot of options available to us, Madam Deputy Speaker. The other thing that we are doing is in the immediate term, we are increasing magistrates' court sentencing powers from 6 months to 12 months maximum imprisonment for a single triable either-way offence, and that measure will also help us to bear down on that large remand population that is currently in prison by ensuring that those on remand are sentenced far more quickly.
Select Committee Member Neil Shastri-Hurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This strategy does little more than commit to deliver the 14,000 places that the previous government committed to do so, except it's going to cost more and it's going to take longer. So to what extent has the government factored in optimism bias when working out the delivery timeframe?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Honestly, the display from the party opposite is quite staggering in terms of the inheritance that we were left with. Still no humility, absolutely whatsoever. In terms of answering the question, we have published this realistic strategy plan on how we plan to deliver this, built in those contingency timelines, offering that real solution. And as I've said, this is less rhetoric than what we got from the party opposite, and actual action on delivering these places. You failed to build these places, or the party opposite failed to build these places. We are actually going to deliver it.
Exactly. The Minister knows you would refer to me and that wouldn't be appropriate. Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Speaker. The previous Conservative government's dereliction of duty failed to deliver 20,000 promised prison places and exposes their hypocrisy of any claims to be the party of law and order. I welcome this new government's 10-year prison capacity statement. And does the Minister agree that publishing an annual statement on prison places will allow transparency, accountability and affirm that we are the party of law and order?
Couldn't agree more, Madam Deputy Speaker. This party is being honest with the public about the state of the situation that we have inherited. We are publishing our plan to be transparent about how we will deliver on this, and we will commit to doing that annually to ensure that the public are never again left in the dark about the state of our prisons.
Neil O'Brien.
Madam Deputy Speaker, since the early release policy introduced by this government was brought in, we've seen criminals who should be in jail out on the streets enjoying themselves with champagne, and one even thanking the Prime Minister personally. It would be much better, instead of letting these dangerous people out of jail, to be sorting out the remand backlog and the 7,000 increase in the number of prison places taken up by people on remand. Instead, the government is capping the number of sitting days. Will the Minister say to the House, she says that the number of sitting days is adequate. At what point will the number of prisoners in our jails waiting on remand be returned to the pre-pandemic level? What is the date by which this will be achieved?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have outlined the issues we are taking to tackle the remand population in our prisons. This is exactly we are dealing with the inheritance that we received from the previous government. We have increased Crown Court sitting days. We've taken action to increase sentencing powers in our magistrates' courts. We will publish our plans in due course. We are being transparent with the House. The Lord Chancellor is in front of the Select Committee next week, and I'm sure we'll be happy to answer these questions then.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I have to say, having listened to some of the contributions from the party opposite, I cannot quite believe my ears. Coming to this place and suggesting that they should be proud of leaving this government a justice system with only fewer than 100 places in men's prisons across England and Wales. So can I ask my honourable friend, would not a better response to, to the statement have been much simpler, a one-word answer? Sorry.
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend hits the nail on the head. It seems sorry seems to be the hardest word for the party opposite here. This government, however, has started as it means to go on, and that is why within the first 6 months of appointment we have already delivered nearly 500 places and pledged to continue building the remaining places of that 20,000 prison building programme. We've also launched the independent sentencing review in parallel with our 10-year prison capacity strategy, and that review will ensure that sentences deliver better outcomes for prisoners, protect the public, and we will always have the space to lock up dangerous offenders.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. She likes to talk about inheritances. If she checks the record, she will discover that prison overcrowding was higher in 2008, in 2009 and in 2010 than it was in 2024. It is true that we brought back longer sentences for the worst offenders. That was the right thing to do. It is also true, Madam Deputy Speaker, that crime came down. Now, there are two enormous areas that she needs to work on, continue to work on, I should say, from the work we were doing in government. One is the population on remand and the length of time people are spending on remand. The other is at a different point in the sense, the length of time that people are waiting for a parole board hearing. But we do need more capacity to replace the older capacity to newer prisons which are more conducive to rehabilitation and getting people into a stable path and into work. So I welcome her continuing with the previous government's programme. I just hope that it's more successful this time than when Gordon Brown's government tried to build the Titan prisons, which if they had been built, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all.
Minister.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question? I believe he was the prisons minister in the previous government, so he will know all too well the impact that this has had on the situation, yet failed to build the amount of prison places that we need. Yet no apology yet again for the British public about the crisis that we have inherited. We need a resilient and functioning prison estate to ensure that prisoners have that opportunity to be rehabilitated, as he mentioned. We are tackling our remand population by ensuring that we are increasing magistrate sentencing powers. We are building those new prison places that he actions. As I've mentioned, we are taking the action. We are delivering on our promises that the previous government failed to deliver.
Paul Kohler.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister is aware of my view that it's folly to build new prisons to increase capacity. All you'll do is get more prisoners, more overcrowding. It's a supply-led industry. But can I ask a different question, Madam Deputy Speaker? Can I ask the Minister to confirm what new ideas will be incorporated in these new prisons? Because rehabilitation, not incarceration, is the key to addressing criminality.
The honourable gentleman makes a valid point. We cannot build our way out of this problem, and the prison population will only continue to increase more quickly than we can build new prisons, and that is why the 10-year prison capacity strategy is just one part of that prolonged solution. The second part is the independent sentencing review, which we've already outlined, but also focusing on preventing reoffending is crucial to this government's mission to build safer streets. For example, this government has committed to halving the prevalence of violence against women and girls and knife crime within a decade. I will be working closely with ministers across government to ensure that we deliver on those bold ambitions.
That is the end of that statement. I'll give the front bench a few moments to swap over.